For those who may not know me, my name is Louis Shackelford, he, him pronouns. I am the Director of External Relations at the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. And so traditionally, the Director of External Relations has provided a biomedical update to the Faith Preconference. And so I am continuing that tradition. So move forward. I won't be too long today. Again, as I said, I'm going to cover some current prevention options, particularly our newest kid on the block, lenacapavir, which is going by the street name USCHA. I don't like that name, but that's the one that they chose for it. So we'll talk about a little bit about lenacapavir, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between injectable PrEP versus a potential HIV vaccine. What's the difference? Something that keeps coming up, and I don't think anybody's really covered it adequately. So I want to talk about that today. Then we'll talk about things in the pipeline. There are quite a few HIV prevention tools in the pipeline. There's always are, thank God. But for the sake of time, I'm going to talk about two tools that are really coming to the forefront, which is a monthly PrEP pill called MK8527. Wonderful name as well. And then we have broadly neutralizing antibodies, or BNABs, which is something that we're working on at the HVTN. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So again, my name is Louis Shackelford, he, him pronouns. I am the Director of External Relations at the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. I'm based out of Seattle, Washington, but I'm from New York City. If you love me, call me a New Yorker. Never call me a Seattleite. I serve as the bridge between HIV science and community. This is something that I've been doing for, as of this month, actually, it'll be 16 years. So I make 16 years this month. And my role in external relations focuses on managing and developing external partnerships, relationships for the network, opportunities for us to increase our visibility and to increase awareness and education around the work that we do. Outside of my HPTN hat, I do also partner with a good colleague and friend of mine, Rodney McCoy, who's based out of DC. You'll see him at the conference. He's on the planning committee. And we and him partner to do presentations on sex positivity through the lens of kink. And so Rodney is the kinkster. I am the academic. And we have a lot of fun in those presentations. We talk about sex, we talk about pleasure, we talk about polyamory, we talk about different types of kink, and we actually give some demonstrations once in a while. And so if you're interested in knowing more about the kink work, the sex positivity work that I do, please come up and ask me. And if you want to know more about kink, Google it. Half the time when nobody's looking. We're going to start out by looking at current HIV prevention options. And so this is a good snapshot of our current HIV prevention toolkit. As people like to call it, we have things like oral PrEP, injectable PrEP, we have post-exposure prophylaxis. These are things that you take post-exposure. Of course, we have HIV testing, U equals U, and the science of U equals U, which has been amazing. We have condoms, internal, external condoms, as we call them now. And of course, you can always change your behavior to lower your likelihood of getting HIV. But again, for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on the newest kid on the block, which is injectable PrEP options. And particularly, we're going to talk about USCHA, aka lenacapavir. And so lenacapavir is a antiretroviral medication, like all of our HIV medications. So this is a medication that is injected. It is subcutaneously injected, which means that it goes below the skin into the tissue, not into the muscle. So you have like skin, tissue, and muscle. This one goes below the skin into the tissue area of the body. It was developed by Gilead Sciences. and it was approved as in the United States as of June 2025. So this is a really big deal in the HIV prevention space because this is an injection that you would only need to prevent yourself from HIV every 6 months or twice a year. So it's a twice a year injection to prevent yourself from getting HIV. Just a quick side note. So I'm going to talk primarily for the sake of time about HIV prevention for all of these products. Please understand that there are treatment versions of these products that are looking at them in almost an identical way. So for example, there's lenacapavir for prevention, but they are also looking at lenacapavir for treatment in the same sort of time cycle of every 6 months, twice a year. So right now, this is the landscape of where lenacapavir used to go is approved. So we have the United States in green, and it's also pending approval in 5 other areas. So you see that it's pending approval in, let's see, in Canada. It's been submitted to regulatory bodies in Canada. It's pending approval also in Brazil, South Africa, and Australia, where it has also been approved outside of the United States. So it's been approved officially in 2 places, in the United States and then in Europe through the European Union's European Medicines Associate Agency. So looking at this, there are actually 2 injectable medications on the market right now. So one is lenacapavir, which is every 6 months. There's another one called cabotegravir. I forget the brand name of it off the top of my head. Does somebody know? No? Anybody in the room? We'll get it later if anybody wants to know. But these are the 2 injectable medications that are on the market and approved in the United States right now for HIV prevention. Aptitude. Yes, that's it. So you have lenacapavir, which is a capsid inhibitor. It inhibits HIV from actually going into the cell at all. Cabotegravir is an integrase inhibitor, which is another part of the HIV life cycle. As I said, lenacapavir is subcutaneous, whereas cabotegravir is intramuscular, so it goes a little deeper. The biggest difference is the number of injections and the volume. So actually the volume is actually similar. So you have one 3 milliliter injection for cabotegravir, and instead of having one 3 milliliter injection for lenacapavir, you have 1.5 milliliter injections. And so 2 injections versus one. And then the injection site is a little bit different. If you look here, it is in lenacapavir is actually in your abdomen, whereas cabotegravir is in the buttocks because it needs a nice big muscle. Gluteus maximus, thank you. And the big difference is the number of times that the injections are given. So lenacapavir, as I mentioned, is twice a year or every 6 months, whereas cabotegravir is every 2 months. One thing that comes up very often, particularly in my work, because we have these injectables and they're lasting longer and longer in the body. And so people are like, what's the difference between an injectable and a vaccine? Because on the surface, when you're getting an injectable, it looks and feels a lot like a vaccine, but they're actually quite different. And so I made this slide just for you all so you can give you some understanding of what the difference between a vaccine and an injectable is. Now, granted, we don't have a vaccine yet. So I'm talking in potentialities. I'm talking based on the history of vaccines in general and what we've developed so far. But just understand that a HIV vaccine is not currently available. And we'll get more into that later on. But in the way a vaccine works versus the way an injectable works, an injectable is medication. And this is the biggest point that I want you to understand before I leave. When you're getting an injectable, you're getting around the medication. You're getting a dose of medication into your body. Whereas a vaccine is an agent that teaches your body how to fight HIV itself. And so there's a big difference there. You are talking about an agent that has to be in your body constantly, a medication that has to be in your body constantly for you to have protection versus your body learning how to protect itself from HIV. And so that's the biggest difference. And that's when immunity comes in. And so understanding that injectable grants you no immunity whatsoever. You are reliant on that medication, just like in somebody who's living with HIV, your health is reliant on your ability to take your medications as prescribed. Same thing with an injectable. You are reliant on the dosing as prescribed. And so where a vaccine, you have active immunity at that point, where your body learns how to protect itself using the vaccine. And so a vaccine tends to last longer. It tends to, if you see at the bottom, vaccines can last for years. Some vaccines that we have last for lifetime. So in the HIV vaccine space, we're trying to develop vaccines that last long as possible, hopefully in the same range as vaccines that we have that last years, if not lifetime. Whereas a medication, so far the injectable medications that we have right now, they last months. There are injectable medications that are in pipeline to last upwards of a year. But again, that is you getting dosed for that medication for that time period. And then the other thing that I like to point out is that if you're taking the medication is going to going to work immediately, most likely. As soon as you get that medication, as soon as you get that injectable in your system, you're going to have protection. Whereas a vaccine, sometimes you need multiple vaccines, and we learned this from the pandemic that it takes sometimes multiple doses of vaccine to gain full immunity, and so you may have to wait a few weeks, a few days before you can get all the doses you need and get your body's immune system primed and up to the level where you have consistent, durable immunity. Any questions about this before I move on? This is really important to understand, and I think it's not covered enough because people think that we're going to just medicate our way out of HIV epidemic. I don't agree that that's going to be the case. I also don't really I'm kind of grand scanning right now. But I personally, this is Louis talking. This is not external relations director. I just don't see us just paying pharmaceutical companies for infinity to continue to dose ourselves until HIV is over. And so that's the advantage of vaccines is that vaccines, again, they tend to last a long time. They tend to be a lot more cost effective because you don't need a dose every 6 months. You don't need a dose every year. You tend to get a vaccine, and once you have that vaccine, the ability of that vaccine to protect you lasts for years and years and years. Maybe you need a booster dose down the line. Absolutely. So the question was, based on where we are today, do we need both vaccines and injectables? And I would say absolutely yes. Because some people are going to need protection immediately. Some people like, hey, there's a party, there's an orgy tonight. I want to go and I want to party and I don't know if I want to remember what happened that night. And so if you're in that situation and you want to party like that, hey, there's an option for you. You can go get an injectable right now. That injectable is going to give you protection and you're going to be good for the next 6 months. Bang. Love it. But there are other people that say, you know what, I don't party that much. But when I do want some protection. I don't know when it's going to be. I just want to know that it's there when I need it. I'm not really a medication person. My wife is like that. She's like, I don't really do medications like that. But you know what? A vaccine, something that helps my body do what it got to do, I'm down with that. And so a vaccine would be best for that person. So that's a very good question. I think both are absolutely necessary. Any more questions before we move on? All right. All right. So this is a good segue to talk about what's in the pipeline. What's coming up in HIV prevention? Again, I don't have time to go through absolutely everything in the HIV prevention pipeline. That would take probably hours. But a few things that I do want to make you aware of. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there is a yearly version, every 12-month version of lenacapavir in development. So that is something that they are actively testing right now. So this is a version of Len that you would get injected, and you would only need that injection once a year to be protected against HIV. They also in investigating what we call a hybrid HIV prevention option. So a hybrid pill. This is one pill with basically two medications. So one to prevent you from getting HIV, and then one maybe to prevent you from getting pregnant for people who have pregnancy potential. And so that is also an option. I think something like that is going to be really great for, again, people with pregnancy potential, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where we know that the HIV epidemic has shifted there into more women and girls. And so an option like this, where you can have one pill that protects you from pregnancy and from HIV, is really appealing in populations like that. But also, again, anybody in the United States who also has pregnancy potential, I can also see this being a really great option for them. Yes, you have some questions? Yes, there is some research being done on. So have you heard of DoxyPrep? DoxyPrep is a basically taking doxycycline, which is a medication to treat STIs. There's research that has shown that if you take that medication before you get STI, just like you take HIV meds before you have HIV, it can prevent you from getting a STI when you come in contact with a STI. And so there is some research looking at the combination of a pill that would contain like a doxy, PEP, and HIV PrEP medication. That's a good question. And so the bigger two that I'm going to focus on right now are a monthly oral PrEP pill, and that's called MK 8527. And then we're going to talk about broadly neutralizing antibodies, and then I'm going to get out your way. So MK8527, we'll talk about that first. This is a monthly PrEP pill. This image is wild to me. Like when you think about it, like imagine having a pill bottle. And again, this is stuff that they're also thinking and testing on the treatment side. So imagine your treatment being 12 pills and you just got one pill for every month. That's wild considering, we were talking about the origins of the HIV epidemic and people were taking, I don't know, 50 pills in the beginning of the epidemic, and to be down, you can go to the doctor, get 12 pills, and that's your treatment for the rest of the year. That's where we're going. But again, I'm talking more about the prevention side right now, so it'd be the same thing. This will be your prep for the rest of the year. So MK85 is an investigational antiretroviral drug. It is made by Merck, and it is a once-a-month pill to prevent you from getting HIV. It is a integrase and reverse transcriptase inhibitor for people who are interested in knowing what part of the HIV life cycle it focuses on. And right now it's being tested in clinical trials. Actually, the big phase 3 trials where we go and we test it in thousands of people, that just opened actually last month in August. But so far, it's been well tolerated, and it should be coming our way very soon. So the phase 3 trials for MK 8527 is called the expressive trial. And there are two expressive trials, the expressive 10 and expressive 11. And so expressive 10 is happening right now in the US and South America and also in parts of Europe, particularly France and Switzerland. And so these are the trials. These are over 4,000 people are being enrolled in these trials. And we have them focusing on cisgender men who have sex with men, trans women, gender non-binary persons. And these are all the people who are included in the trial. And so they did a really good job in making the trial really inclusive, I think. And then we also have the kind of sister of that trial, that was Impressive 11. So Impressive 10 is happening in Africa, particularly South Africa, Kenya, and Uganda. And again, it's over 4,000 people, and it's mainly focusing on cisgender girls, young women, and women in general in Africa. And again, that's because the dynamics of the HIV epidemic are more, women and girls are more impacted in Africa. So that populations tend to be focused on more. Okay, so now I'm going to end with what we do at the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, which is broadly neutralizing antibodies. So some of you have maybe have seen me present on antibodies or broadly neutralizing antibodies before. And so what are antibodies first and foremost? Antibodies are proteins that are part of your immune system. They are specific to each disease or foreign invader that comes into your body. So when you get a cold, for example, your body makes antibodies specifically to fight that cold. And antibodies for HIV are specific as well. And we found that some people make very, very what we call elite antibodies that are really good at blocking or fighting not just one type of HIV, but many, many different types of HIV. And so we call these broadly neutralizing or broadly neutralizing antibodies because they fight a broad number of HIV strains. And so again, broadly neutralizing antibodies or BNAbs fight many different strains of HIV. The goal is to find antibodies that can fight HIV strains that exist all over the world. And so that we can give you one antibody no matter where you are in the world, and it will be effective wherever you are. And it's usually given, right now, it's given through IV infusion, but we're hopeful that to get it down to an injection at some point. And it skips the step of your body learning how to fight a disease, or in this case, HIV itself, and it's just giving you the antibody directly. So normally your body would, for a vaccine, you would get an agent. That agent would teach your body how to make antibodies specific to whatever disease you're fighting, in this case, HIV. And then your body would make antibodies on its own. So this approach skips the step of teaching your body how to make antibodies and just gives them to you. So we have more of immediate impact and you have immediate protection. So similar to how you get an injectable where you're just getting that protection immediately. We're thinking that the HIV antibodies that we're using right now are lasting about 6 months. And so far they're safe because your body's used to dealing with antibodies already. You have plenty of antibodies in your body right now. And so this does not look any different to your body. And so it's really safe, really tolerable in what we found so far. So this is just a little visualization of how antibodies work. And so when HIV enters your system, it attaches to the receptors on your cells, and then it goes into the cells and it creates more copies of itself. So antibodies block the tools that HIV uses to connect to our cells. And so once the antibody fully blocks this HIV from infecting our cell, we would say that this HIV has been neutralized. And so that's where you get the term neutralizing antibody or broadly neutralizing antibody because they can block or neutralize a broad swath of HIV strains. Correct. So your body normally would make these. So, like when you get a cold, your body's making antibodies actively to neutralize that cold. And so, if we have a vaccine for HIV, your body's going to make these and neutralize them on a and neutralize HIV on a regular basis as you come in contact with HIV. However, since we don't have a vaccine yet, the thought is that we can make antibodies that neutralize HIV. And then once we find the right combination of antibodies, we can make a vaccine that now teaches your body how to make these antibodies. And then that's how we can get ourselves to an effective HIV vaccine. So it's kind of reverse engineering a vaccine. Is we go to the antibodies, see which ones work, and then once we know which ones work, we can just tell the body, make these antibodies, and there's your vaccine. So we've been able to test antibodies in a large scale trial called the AMP trial or antibody mediated prevention trial. This was done, um, that started back in 2017 and it ran until about 2020. And that's when we got our first results. It showed that antibodies, again, were very well tolerated, which we expected because antibodies are natural to the immune system, natural to the body. And it did show that for some specific strains, antibodies could be extremely effective. It also showed that when an antibody is not effective against a strain of HIV, it basically does nothing for that strain. And so it gave us the idea that we need a combination of antibodies, not just one, because with a combination of antibodies, we can hit many different strains at the same time and give us more coverage across the broad spectrum of HIV strains that are out there. I'll skip this slide because I think I've basically said it. It's pretty much talking about what we found out. We found out that antibodies were well tolerated, and yeah, that's pretty, yes. That is possible for you to be infected with more than one, or you to acquire one or more strain of HIV. So that, yeah, that does happen. Some people call it super infection. Uh, yeah, so the biggest where strains come into our work are what we call clades. And um, so it just so happens that around the world, there are some strains of HIV that are more present in one area versus another area. So, for example, in the United States, there's one strain of HIV that's really prevalent, whereas in Africa, another strain is really prevalent. And then if you go to Asia, it's more of another strain. And so I have another slide that shows that, which I don't think is in this deck, but you'll see there's a diversity of HIV that lives across the world. And so when I talk about broadly neutralizing antibodies, it really is talking about how can we create a cocktail of antibodies that's effective all across the world. That's what we're talking about. So not just in the United States, but really like, can we create a cocktail of antibody that works as well in the United States as it does in Asia, as it does in Africa? So good question. So this, since the AMP study, we've done different studies on other antibodies. So the first antibody we studied was VRC01. VRC01 was really safe, really tolerable. It lasted for 6 months. However, it really was focused on just a few strains of HIV. Those strains that it was effective against, it worked really well, but the ones that it wasn't, not so well. And so we started looking at other antibodies. And so they have like an alphabet soup of names, PGT 121. But these are the studies that we've been doing on various antibodies, and we've seen across studies that they are safe, that they last a long time. Many of them, almost every one of them, last 6 months, that they are well tolerated. And so we have really high hopes for how these antibodies could work as a prevention tool in and of themselves, and how they can continue to teach us more about getting towards an HIV vaccine. So with that, I'm going to show you a little bit of a video as I come to a close about how we think a combination of antibodies would work as an HIV prevention tool.
This animation shows how bNAbs work to neutralize HIV variants, shown here in various colors, by preventing them from attaching to human cells. These 3 antibodies are being used in current HVTN-HPTN studies and have been identified as the combination to take forward into future studies. HIV has protein spikes on its surface, and antibodies can attach to different facets of these spikes. Antibodies move around in the bloodstream, attach to HIV, and neutralize it, as shown here when the virion turns gray. And they block HIV from being able to attach to human cells. Researchers believe that giving combinations of bNAbs increases the likelihood that more strains of HIV will be blocked. Thanks for watching.
Okay. And again, I come to a close. This slide really reiterates something I said earlier, which is how we expect this to guide us towards a potential HIV vaccine. And again, it's reverse engineering those antibodies. So once we know these antibodies do a great job of preventing HIV all across the world, we can come up with a vaccine that teaches our bodies to natively make those antibodies. And so the idea is that it'll be an effective vaccine that you can take one time and it gives you antibody protection for years on end. And that's pretty much it. So we talked about, AMP being kind of the fundamental study that we're using to move forward into additional combination antibody studies. And we feel strongly that this combination antibody approach is going to be the way forward, not just for a new HIV prevention tool, but also for an HIV vaccine. Lastly, I want to say that we need your support. So most of you are aware of the news and everything going on in the government nowadays. I'm not going to get into it, but we are an NIH-funded entity. Our funding very much, almost all of our funding comes from the Division of AIDS, which is part of the NIH, NIH is a part of the Office of Health and Human Services, which is led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, if you did not know, is not a big fan of vaccines. So he is not, we don't think he's our biggest fan right now. And so if you believe in an HIV vaccine, if you believe in HIV research, please support entities like the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. We need your support. It matters that your government representatives know that this work is happening, because a lot of them don't know that the work is happening, that they know this work means something to you, and that they know that we need more than just the medications that we have or the tools that we have. We need more options for more people to really, really end the HIV epidemic. And so that's it for me. Questions? How a drug like Biktarvy work? So Biktarvy is the once a month or once a day pill to prevent HIV. I believe it is, so Biktarvy is actually a combination of different medications. So if you know, an HIV regimen contains different different medications, sorry. It contains a medication that prevents HIV from reducing itself, and it's usually like some medication to boost that process. So all they did is, instead of having you take 3 different medications to do that, or 2 different medications for that process, they put all that medication into one pill. And so all the HIV medication you need for your treatment is basically in one pill, and you take it once a day. Does that make sense? All right. And same table.
side, you're doing the vaccine side.
Correct.
So have you made like dramatic leaps toward a vaccine in these years? And is your work being slowed currently or not yet because of the federal stuff?
Yes. Yes. Yes to all of it. We have made progress towards a vaccine. We have different vaccine candidates in the pipeline right now. Many of them are actually almost all of them are in the phase 1 stage. So that's why you're not hearing about them, because phase 1 studies are really small. They're usually less than 100 people. And they usually, in the past, they usually enroll people who are actually really healthy and not living with HIV. Now they're getting more inclusive to where we can actually, because you couldn't even have like a vulnerability to HIV to be in the phase 1 trial in the past. So you couldn't be a gay man, for example, or if you were, you had to have no sex. I'm not kidding. So now they're making it more inclusive where you could have sexual behavior and do that, but there's still very, very small trials taking place all across the country. So as those candidates move through the pipeline, the hope is, if we continue to exist, that will have more big trials where you'll see, really viable HIV vaccine candidates that could potentially work. But we're doing that in tandem with antibodies because we feel like antibodies could be kind of a shortcut for us getting to a vaccine as well. In terms of if we're being impacted, yes, we're being very impacted. A lot of funding is being cut from our organization. It's already been cut. Um, we're on a 7-year grant cycle. That cycle comes to an end next year. So what happens after that, we don't know. Um, there is a process in this grant cycle where they take public comments and public input. You could go to the Division of AIDS and say, hey, I think we need the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. You should continue to fund them if you feel inclined to do so, and I encourage you to do so. However you feel about research, however you feel about this process, I encourage you to give your input. But yeah. Yeah, I have to be careful though, because I'm also in the military. So I can't be in the front. I can be in the middle or the back. So we have a session on military veterans and HIV on Saturday in the morning, 9 a.m. It's going to be one of the sessions that are live streamed as well. So anybody who's interested in the space, in the intersection of military and HIV, please join. We actually have one of our panelists in that session in the back, Dr. Elijah Nicholas, Air Force retiree. So Amber.
Didn't affect my diabetes time. In the resistance to be, because I was moved over from Norville because the funding because of COVID, you wouldn't be over there. So I'm worried about resistance being moved because of comorbidities. And I advocate for a number of people in their 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at like you become a big Harvey, you moving over to big Harvey because of diabetes. But do we look at how many times I move and is it the same claim? That's what gives me the
So the question was around the resistance and concerns around resistance and comorbidities and being moved from one medication to another when living with HIV because of how it interacts with how the first medication interacts with others you may be taking because of comorbidities. So I'm not a doctor. There are some in the room. So I preface it with that. I will say that resistance is very individualized. And so a lot of what takes place has to be a conversation between you and your doctor. And I say if you have concerns about resistance, first and foremost, you want to be expressing those to your doctor and making them aware of your concerns and so that they can watch for this. Your doctor should be testing you on a regular basis for resistance, and you can always request, a resistance panel to see what, if any medications you have been resistant to. That should be required for you to be moving from one medication to another as well. In terms of research around resistance, that's not my particular space, so I can't speak to it. I do know that they're always looking at resistance when it comes to um, medications with a long tail, like injectables. So they look at, once you drop in that injectable medication, it's being kind of fed to your body over time. And so, you have to make sure that you get your re-up. If they say you got to get it every 6 months, you want to get it in that 6 months, because after some point, it's going to drop to a point where it may not be as effective in preventing HIV. And so that's where there is a research I know that looks at resistance. But I don't know off the top of my head what's going on in like the space of comorbidities and resistance. Any other question? In the back? In the back? One? Last one? Probably the last question. That's a very good question. So the question was around government research versus industry research, and kind of who's doing what and what the relationship is. That's a very good question. So a lot of the medications that we have, I say the majority of the medications that we have in HIV treatment and prevention are on the backs of NIH funded government research. Almost every medication that is being taken by people living with HIV right now has in some way, some shape or form, either been developed by NIH researchers and then, I'll say been developed by NIH researchers, or the foundational product was developed by NIH researchers. And so what happens is people who are funded to do research by the government, like the HBTN, we are not in the business of making products. So if we make an HIV vaccine that is effective, if we find an HIV that is effective, which pray God we do, we are not going to turn that into a project. We are never, as the HVTM, are never going to sell you a vaccine or any other product. What's going to happen once we create it is now we're going to go here industry. The government we're going to give that results to the government. The government's going to go here pharmaceutical industry. Here is the blueprint of an effective HIV vaccine that was created through government funding. Take it and make a product. And then the industry comes in, let's say Gilead comes in, they take it and they make the first effective HIV vaccine that's widely available across the world. That's how the system is supposed to work. The government doesn't make any vaccines. Any vaccine you take in could have been developed by the government, wasn't sold to you by the government. It's usually companies like Pfizer, like Sanofi. Sanofi Pasteur, one of the biggest sellers of vaccines, period, throughout the world. A lot of those vaccines weren't developed by them initially. They were developed by government research. They took that, made it into the product, and then they iterate on it. They make it better over time. So that's how the pipeline works. And so pharma decides what products they want to make and pursue. It's oftentimes that they don't pursue things like vaccines, because vaccines are kind of low profit for them. Because ideally, if we give you an HIV vaccine, you may have to take, if it's effective enough, that might be a vaccine you take once in your life. Versus, something like Descovy, it's a daily pill. And you have to have a prescription for every day that you're living. So I think a lot of pharma is focused on products that can increase their profits or sustain their profits. And so they tend not to gravitate towards things like vaccine. That's why entities like us exist. So they do. So pharma definitely does put their profits into research. So that's how we got the Scovy. So we had Truvada for PrEP, and they basically created the Scovy as a newer, better version of Truvada, less side effects, less hits on the liver and things like that. It's a little bit of a cleaner version of Truvada, but it's essentially a newer, better version of Truvada. So they're iterating on the drugs that they have, and that's a lot of what they do in terms of their regimen, but they also are creating regimens like that drug that I tell you that once a month pill, that's a Merck pill. So Merck is actively, all the trials, all that research that I showed you, I go back to it real quick. This is all Merck. This is a Merck trial. And this is Merck pushing this pill forward because this is going to be their next big thing for Merck. Whereas Gilead has all the injectables or has lenacapavir, Vive has cabotegravir. This is going to be the next big thing for Merck in the HIV space. And Vive is also working on I think a 6-month injectable as well. They're working on a version of cabotegravir, iterating on cabotegravir. So they have a 2-month version of cabotegravir. They're iterating that to turn that into a 6-month version. So that's kind of how a lot of what I see in the pharma space is them iterating, either trying to create the next big thing, or they're iterating on things that they have. I think we're
Still though, research that was done by
yes,
government that's given to them to then turn.
correct. So cabotegravir, I actually worked on the trial that got cabotegravir approved, and that was a HVTN trial. It was funded by Vive, I believe. It did have funding by Vive, but it used government resources or NIH funded resources to get that to FDA approval. So even if they do create it, they may still go back to the government and use government infrastructure to get their approvals and things that they need. So, ooh, y'all looking hard. I think we got one more question. Is it a quick question that I can do a quick answer? So the question is, since we have U equals U, is it a better investment for government to invest in knowledge, awareness, and implementation of U equals U versus trials of new products for HIV prevention? Is that what you're asking?
Instead of vaccine.
Instead of vaccines. So I would say that you need both because yes, U equals U works, but we see that there are still people who are left out from the U equals U equation, particularly people who are low income, particularly people of color. They tend to be disproportionately left out of low income of the U equals U equation. Not to say that U equals U doesn't work for them. It's just that we don't always see that being fully treated for HIV also comes with a certain socioeconomic status. And so until we get something like universal health care, until we're able to make sure everybody is treated and everybody has access to adequate treatment and adequate testing for HIV, we also need to make sure that people have options for HIV prevention. The thing about a vaccine is that in ideal world, it can be as similar to how we got rid of a disease like polio, and that we just went around the world vaccinating people. And people got that vaccination one time and then they didn't worry about polio again. And we could go to high economic groups, we can go to low economic groups, get them vaccinated one time. So whereas U equals U needs constant engagement with the medical system to make sure that it's upkept, a vaccine could be a one-time thing that prevents you from HIV from a lifetime. And so I think having both is essential because we need people to have access to medical care, but we can also, with a vaccine, we can also do a project, around the world. It depends. It depends. I think if we had an effective HIV, every country around the world that's been heavily impacted HIV would be highly, highly interested in having a vaccine because it would lower their healthcare costs. It would lower the burden of HIV. It would lower stigma around the world. It could really change the world in a very big way. Anyway, I'm done. I'm out of time.